Thank you. I now call on Drew Smith. I can give you 9 minutes and a little bit of time for interventions.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We've had a useful debate. It started lively, but I think we've been moving slowly towards consensus. And we have made a lot of progress since we first discussed this issue last year and then most recently around 5 months ago. Can I begin by adding my thanks to the committee convener members and the clerking team? And I particularly want to echo the appreciation from this side and around the Chamber for the work which has been done by very many people in the voluntary sector who have, for quite a protracted period of time, had to prepare information and evidence on the impact which welfare reform will have in Scotland, even if that evidence has been, in the words of the committee, unrelentingly depressing. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of attending the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. Ian Galloway, convener of the Kirk's Church and Society Council, addressed the coalition government saying, "Austerity is a word we hear a lot of at the moment. It has a sort of moral stiff upper lip quality about it. It sounds like something that might do us all good. But the reality is somewhat different. Food banks are opening across the UK at a rate of 1 every 4 days. If austerity means we all have to tighten our belts, and maybe especially those who can most afford it, then so be it. But what is really happening is that the most vulnerable are being punished out of all proportion." Tory and Liberal members may not like to hear it, and as Kevin Stewart and Jamie Hepburn have pointed out, Liberal members don't like to hear it so much they won't listen to it. But it is a view that is shared not just in the Church, but by many on this side, and I know by many on the Government, if not all on this side, and all on the Government benches too. These welfare reforms are about cutting support to some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and the committee is right to highlight their grave concerns about the impact which cutting £2.5 billion worth of benefits will have in Scotland. So I am pleased that, as a Scottish Parliament, we have a clear majority for seeking to mitigate the worst effects of some of the most disgraceful changes which the coalition parties are seeking to implement. Chair.
Mary Scanlon.
Does the member think it's right that people on DLA are left for years or decades without reassessment when their condition could have deteriorated and they need far higher level of support and help? Do you not agree that reassessment is necessary?
Drew Smith.
I think the member is almost at a reasonable point. I think we all would expect that there is a role for assessment to ensure that people get what they are capable, what they are entitled to, and what they require. There's not a role for assessment in harassing people and attempting to punish them through bureaucracy. Labour and the SNP have come together to agree that another way must be found. In rejecting the most offensive parts of the LCM, we agreed together to set up a special committee of this Parliament, and the Scottish Government brought forward their bill, which we have debated today at stage 1. Now, Jackie Baillie, in opening for Labour, made clear that we do support the general principles of this bill. However, I think the test should be whether the bill meets our expectations and intentions when we embarked upon this process. We should remember that we have been debating a unique piece of legislation this afternoon, as I think Michael McMahon highlighted and Elaine Murray most recently highlighted, because this is the first time that this place has rejected UK proposals in an area where a UK solution would, in our view, have been desirable, and where the bulk of power and legislative authority therefore resides at the UK level. At the outset, the Scottish Parliament was clear. We wanted a Scottish welfare reform bill which would put in place the framework to ensure that benefits could be provided to those that require them in the timescale in which we, and most importantly, they need. We wanted a bill which provided for new ways to test eligibility for passported benefits. We wanted clarity to ensure that devolution of the social fund worked to assist anyone who may need to rely upon it. Most importantly, we wanted a bill which provided for mitigation of the worst effects of the UK Welfare Reform Act in respect of the devolved aspects. We could add that we also wanted an opportunity for public debate about what assistance and support should be provided by the Scottish Government and local government. We wanted a workable set of proposals which local government and others would be able to implement and which provided for the appropriate resources to ensure that they could do their job. All in all, a lot to expect from a short bill, which is largely providing enabling powers. And Labour members in this debate and others have raised a number of concerns about whether the bill lives up to those expectations upon it. Siobhan McMahon on community care grants, Anne McTaggart on financial and digital inclusion, Margaret McDougall on housing benefit, and both Margaret McDougall and Margaret Burgess on particularly the issue of advice services, which I'll come on to slightly later. In effect, what we have is enabling legislation which could provide for interim measures designed to safeguard the entitlements of those who rely on any or several benefits provided for or by devolved or local policies. And all of that, Presiding Officer, is welcome. Furthermore, we appear to have support for the principle that new applicants in those groups who currently have eligibility for a passported benefit should have access to what they need, regardless of what future support they may have under universal credit. And that is also very welcome, if that is what the Cabinet Secretary is committing to today. We now need very much more work to be done on how this future eligibility will be assessed. In so doing, the scrutiny role of the Parliament and the committee it has set up for this express purpose will, I think, continue to be vital. The committee's ability to work together and provide the level of scrutiny required has not perhaps been the best example of how this should be done, and we've heard some of that today. But it should be a clear conclusion of the Stage 1 debate and the debate which has gone on in the voluntary sector that further powers which the Scottish Government are seeking to take should require a robust procedure involving the affirmation of this Parliament. All of us who are signed up to do something about this deserve no less, and the Cabinet Secretary should welcome challenges to ensure that we are doing all we can to mitigate, rather than to demand some acquiescence to the view that the Government always knows best. And I have to say that Elaine Murray was right to point out that the First Minister missing the meeting today was regrettable, but we're all, I'm sure, pleased to see that the Minister for Public Health has hot-footed it back from that meeting, and we'll look forward to some of the information that came out in the debate, and has been a frustration of the committee that they have not been able to receive from the UK Government, and hopefully more of that information was provided today. We should also be clear that consultation which will follow this bill should be as full and active as possible. And as Michael McMahon said right at the beginning, that consultation needs to be on draft regulations. We need to consult based on proposals. People need to know what they are commenting on and what the options are. And I commend the work of the Poverty Alliance in this, and particularly their evidence and participation in change model, which was recently showcased at the Poverty Assembly, as one of the ways of showing how people who actually rely on benefits should be involved in shaping what happens next. The final clear conclusion, which I believe should be taken from this debate and from the evidence which the committee heard at Stage 1, is that we need to do very much more on the provision of information and advice. As full implementation of the attacks on our welfare state draw nearer. Margaret Burgess was right to raise this. Last year, our CABs dealt with 203,462 new benefit cases. That represents a third of their total caseload. And in the same year, funding for those advice services fell by 9%. All the indications are that demand will explode further as benefit cuts are implemented, and anxiety about new assessments increases. This could result in advice services in Scotland simply grinding to a halt. In contrast, the Scottish Government are accruing £1.7 million a year in consequentials due to increases in advice service funding in England and in Wales. So why are we still waiting for the SNP to pass that money onto the front line? Understanding what is happening to real lives out there is the Government's real test on welfare reform. Arguing over words and lines in a committee report is not the response Scotland needs from its Parliament. Pocketing cash which could make a difference to the cash in the pockets of real people is not what is expected of the Scottish Government. And any attempt to obfuscate future parliamentary scrutiny of their actions by seeking to make use of a less onerous scrutiny procedure will not do either the SNP or the people that we are trying to help any good whatsoever. So in closing, Presiding Officer, we will be supporting this bill at Stage 1, but I hope the Cabinet Secretary will reflect seriously on the concerns that have been raised in this debate and will no doubt be raised as we go forward to Stage 2 and try to put in place a bill and a piece of legislation in Scotland that can do what we all want it to do, which is to mitigate the effects of these reforms.
Cabinet Secretary.